Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we proudly bring to you Mormonism Live!
Shut up and sit down.
Hey, everybody. How are you doing tonight? Welcome to Mormonism Live.
Woo-hoo! So there's our live audience giving us a little applause. Just happens to be a little MP3 file. But here we are, RFM. We're back for another episode, Mormonism Live. I think this is this number 48, I think? Number 48.
That's my count.
Yeah, and
we're 4 weeks away from our 1 year anniversary.
4 weeks away from our 1 year anniversary. I love it because we have put out a show every single week. I've missed a couple of those, but Jonathan Streeter, just like last week, was kind enough to fill in. I did have a chance to listen to just a little bit of it at the airport before I got on the airplane to head on my way back.
I feel like I should get you something special.
Why is that? For a 1 year anniversary?
Well, yeah. What do you get for the 1 year anniversary? I can never keep the anniversary straight because I usually get divorced right before I get far along in that process.
If you're buying me a gift, it should be like a yacht or something.
I've had at least 2 1 year anniversaries, so I should know. Is the 1 year, is that the yacht anniversary?
Is it the second year that's hard to get to?
Yeah, it is. It's very difficult. It's like second Nephi getting through it.
If I'm buying you a gift, let's make sure it's cheap. But if you're getting me something, let's make sure it's really nice.
Very good. By the way, you didn't watch the last part of the show last week?
Okay.
You didn't?
I did not. No.
Oh, my Lord. Well, I tell you something. I and everybody else found out why it is that you don't let me talk directly to the callers.
Why is that?
Because pandemonium ensues.
You lost all control of the audience of the live phone calls, huh?
Yes, you are a tempering influence on me, and your absence was sorely felt.
Okay, well, I'll have to go back and give it a listen. I'm trying to figure out how to make my name disappear and your name disappear, but I guess for now we'll just leave them up there.
When you figure that out, you could get a position on the Strengthening Church Members Committee.
Maybe. I think that's probably further ahead in technology than those 12 guys sitting in a room watching all these blog posts and listening to all these podcasts. That's got to be a hell of a job to listen, to try to keep believing, keep paying tithing, because they're not going to let you serve on the committee if you're not paying tithing. So you got to believe, at least pronounce belief publicly. You have to keep paying tithing. Meanwhile, you keep listening to Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel and Jonathan Streeter. And I got to imagine, Lindsay Hansen Park and all the other podcasters, John DeLynn. And at some point, your testimony just unravels and you're stuck working for the SCMC.
It's not a job. They give them hazard pay.
And it's probably is volunteer, isn't it? Like everything else in the church.
Oh, I think so. You volunteer when they tell you to. And also, my understanding is they rotate them in and out with some frequency.
Yeah, they probably do because they all lose their testimony listening to you and me.
And they take long, hot showers after the show's over.
Or cold ones, right. So tonight, my friend, it's my week. And what I thought we would do would be a lot of fun is to have a conversation about this thing. This is a wonderful book by the author and illustrator, Mark Elwood. We're going to bring him on now. And Mark, how are you doing today? Let me get you unmuted here for just a second. How are you doing today, my friend?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, excellent. We're glad to have you on. It's an honor to have you on because I'm looking at this book, and you and I met maybe a couple of years ago at a Sunstone session. And you gave me one of these posters. I think it's this very one that I showed up on the screen, which I can put up there again for a second. This poster with Joseph Smith as a kid, kind of with his seer stone and his hat. And you gave me one of these posters free, and you were really kind to me. You had a nice conversation with me. And I was getting ready to go into my session where I was going to show people how Joseph Smith took tin or copper and fabricated the gold plates. And you had a replica of the gold plates on your table. And you're like, Bill, take this with you. It'll help. And it really was. It was really made for a great prop and display kind of as I was giving the presentation. The only trouble was they didn't weigh the at least 80 pounds or so.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm from Atlanta, and I had to transport that in my suitcase. They weren't going to let me carry a gold tablet that size. Sorry.
How are you going to
No.
get that through the metal detector at the airport?
Yeah. Yeah, they're behind me. Actually, they're I don't know in my head, but they're behind me up there, and they're made of foam, so they're pretty light.
It's a
Gotcha.
triptych,
Yeah.
and from here it looks like Joseph may be being flanked by Sally Chase and, don't tell me, Lumen Walters.
Yeah. Great job, RFM.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Look at that. We're going to learn maybe a little more about Lumen Walters. This is one of my favorite topics, by the way, Mark. I did an episode on Elvin's Hand. I've done a couple other episodes talking about Joseph Smith's treasure digging. And it's really my favorite facet of Mormonism is this early folk magic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll be a lot of fun here to have this conversation. Let's start off kind of talking about what led you to creating this book. Like, what was the impetus for the idea that you said one day, like, hey, I'm going to start drawing pictures of this and trying to kind of get an idea or give an idea of what this might have looked like?
Right. Well, okay. So I definitely started like reading books at some point, kind of got curious about, Mormon origins. It was after I'd already left the faith. But at some point I picked up Making of a Prophet by Dan Vogel. And, I just found myself sketching right out of that book, just story after story. That in turn kind of led to, following along there, his dialogue article called The Location of Joseph Smith's Early Treasure Quests. And, that was super fun to follow through. And, after that, I just kept going, finding different sources. And I guess at some point, the sketches piled up, and I started taking notes on who was involved in each treasure dig, because that was the part that just kind of stuck out to me. I was like, where was it? Because you can actually pinpoint these. Where was it? Who was there? What were they trying to get? And it's just, on note cards. And then at some point I was like, this is actually, you could put these together and make a pretty interesting story. And from there, I went through different ideas of how I was going to present this story. But I ended up kind of following the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. And I realized that Joseph's storyline can really fit in there well. So, the title of the book is The Glass Looker. And that, if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell, the lowest point on the arc is basically at that point. So that's basically the halfway point will be the trial, 1826 trial, and around those events. So,
which is where the name came from.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I think the average believing member of the church is pretty unaware of all of this early folk magic and all of these stories. And I thought you did such a beautiful job putting this together in a collection. And I think the animation, the illustrations make it look more safe, if that makes sense. Like, it looks like something cool. And if I was a member of the church, this would be something that would interest me to dive into, and for the first time to kind of tackle Joseph Smith's treasure digging and the folk magic. And I just thought you did a phenomenal job of putting all this together. You mentioned kind of you getting excited about Joseph Smith's treasure digging. How did you go about putting this book together? Like, how did you decide what to include and what not to? How did you decide to do it in the format that you did with illustrations, which obviously you're an artist in that sense. And so I'm sure that's a huge part of it. But I'm also curious, like, you included sources, which I think RFM mentioned. You give some of these stories that are kind of off to the side that most of us don't encounter. And I'm just curious kind of what went into kind of how you created it.
Okay. Well, so the back, I guess, behind the scenes is that, as I collect these stories, it's, I'm like standing on the shoulders of giants, right? There's all these brilliant guys and women who have put together all these, documents and sources. And you can pick up any of these big books. And so I take all those together and kind of pick out the stories that will fit into the narrative. Um, it's really hard for me because I'm like a completionist, and I just love all the stories, and I'm like, this is a great story because of whatever. It kind of recognizes Joseph in this way, or it just gives it a little detail that maybe we overlook. And I think uh, that's sort of, I don't know. I guess I took those stories and then I put them into spreadsheets. Um, it's kind of nitty gritty. I ended up making like a giant Google map, and I guess that's like physically how I'm kind of constructing it. I'll take lines from sources and sort of put them in a spreadsheet and then put, where it's coming from. And if I ever make up a detail, I try to keep track of those details that I'm making up, because sometimes I have to just to stitch one narrative to the next. Does that cover? I'm trying to remember the other part of the question.
Yeah, just you chose to kind of include the sources, which I thought was a big deal, because people are going to be skeptical if they're reading this as a believer. And as a post-Mormon, I'm always curious where these stories come from. So it was interesting to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I guess that is one reason like I put the sources in there, because not everyone's going to go pick up those big books, and I'm hoping that it kind of gets people interested in looking at those stories. Now I will say, like, I'm since I'm an artist and I'm not really an academic scholar or documentary historian, I kind of have a little bit of slack here. I don't think I'm held to the same standards as some of these guys, so I guess, like, even though some of these stories are like told 50 60 years after the fact, I still consider it as something valid that tells something about what the people thought about Joseph at the time. Even there's always problems. There's dates, there's misspellings of names pretty bad sometimes, and so a lot of these stories are maybe overlooked because of their they're folklore, a lot of them, and they're not necessarily what I believe Joseph did or anything, but they're just stories that I think really give us a better understanding of who he was and how people saw him.
One of the things that happened when I was reading it, and I've read through the whole thing, made copious notes, which I probably won't bore you with most of
No, please do.
tonight, but I love the setup, the way it's structured, which is where you have a vignette,
Yeah.
and then you have the documentation for the vignette. And honestly, I am not as well acquainted with early sources like Dan Vogel is. By the way, Dan Vogel is a frequent watcher of this show. For all I know, he's in the audience right now. And I noticed you mentioned his name along with others, giving them credit for the research. And also Jonathan Streeter came in for honorable mention as far as encouragement.
Yeah. So I got to do a quick shout out to like my patrons. Like, honestly, like, I'm self-publishing this through my own little company thing, but I wouldn't have been able to do it without patrons. And Jonathan Streeter was one of the first guys. We were in a car together at a on location Sunstone event, I think, in Nauvoo, and we had a ways to drive, and he was talking about Edward Kelly and John Dee. And I was talking about this idea I had. I was like, I'm thinking of making this story. And that's kind of, he encouraged me right from the very beginning. So
John Dee will be in the prequel.
Yeah, if I do a prequel.
But yeah, and there's a lot of stories in here that, were striking me as I hadn't heard these before, or I didn't remember them. And then to read the documentation at the end, which is also sort of done artfully. But it's very legible, and you're giving the sources and where they came from and the content of them. And I was surprised to find basically that you are following these pretty darn closely, and even using lines of dialogue or descriptions directly from the sources in your story. That's
right. Yeah. It's kind of a weird project. It's part art and part, history, and I go on location, as much as I can, and go out there and, tromp through the woods, try to find the locations that Dan Vogel and, some of these sources talk about. So,
oh, by the way, Mark, some people are going to be listening to this in audio only and not watching. Bill has put up the website where you can go to order a copy of the book. But could you tell our listeners where they can go to buy this book?
Yeah, sure. So my website is the place to get it right now, although I am basically out at this point of the first printing. So I'll give my website, but actually, if you want a copy and you live in Utah, the best place to go right now is Benchmark Books. They have the last copies of the first printing and they're signed. So yeah, and they also have the best deal right now, better than I can do. So
I was going to ask you about that under
yeah,
the Martin Harris's sword,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which I learned about from your book. Thank you. And I thought, this looks like a signature.
Yeah, that's it. That's my signature. So yeah, otherwise, my website, I will have a new printing available soon. They're printing it like as we speak. It'll be 2 weeks or so before it's available, but you can order it there. It is theglasslooker.com.
Theglasslooker.com. And I didn't complete the thought, which you already understood, which is that Glasslooker comes from the 1826, Bainbridge,
That's right.
New York Bainbridge trial, where Joseph Smith was accused and tried for being a glass looker.
Yeah. And it kind of, I don't know, I think he might have even referred to himself. I'd have to go back and look at that for sure, but I think he might have even referred to himself as a glass looker, perhaps in that trial. Honestly, if you want to read the Glass Looker trial, like the events of that right now, one of the best places to do it is Fair Mormon. So, or is it just Fair now? Whatever it is. Yeah.
Who the heck knows? It's just Fair now because they got rid of
so many times.
I know. Well, they got tired of offending the creator of the universe by having Mormon appended to Fair, so they got rid of it and just went back to Fair.
They have a really good article though there on their website that of course it's slanted, but they have a lot of great sources. And when I'm in a hurry, sometimes I'll just go there to find it.
Absolutely. And something that was really neat is that you do your vignettes, you create your vignettes off these historical sources. And the thing that I thought was very impressive about it is that you're not really there, as far as I can tell, to take a position on accuracy or anything else, but you're just there trying to create artwork that depicts what the sources themselves say. And some are things that are positive about Joseph Smith, at least from a believer's point of view. Some things are maybe more questionable. I don't think there was anything in there that I would see as negative about Joseph Smith. He seems to be the hero and the protagonist of the story, and he's having adventures this is all before Moroni shows up. I think they'll probably be part 2, but he's having all these incredible adventures with glass looking, with demons, with spirits, with treasure digging, all these great things, and becomes this wonderful story. And one of the things that really touched me, I'm sorry, Bill, this is me, I apologize.
You're good.
One of the things that touched me is, after all, I love the opening with Captain Kidd. And I loved it when he shoots, the guy he trusts or whatever, and leaves him there, right? Because dead men tell no tales, etc. I thought that was wonderful because I thought that's going to happen. And then it did. And it was kind of creepy. But the first story about Joseph Smith then is this little incident that I don't recall ever hearing, where he helps out this little girl who is being kind of treated badly by her brothers, and she's too tired to walk any further, and they just make fun of her and leave her. And then Joseph Smith puts her on his shoulder and walks her to her house. Walking girls to his house would happen later, but early on, he's just walking them to her house. Excuse me. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of like, a lot of times people ask me like, why did I pick that story to start out? Why didn't I start with the first vision or something like that? I like that story because, first of all, like I found it as a good way to introduce Joseph, where, it sort of disarms like ex-Mormons, perhaps there might be like, whoa, wait a minute, we're not going to trash Joseph through this whole book. Or, but it also, like when you read it, and if you read the source after it, it's really enlightening, because it talks about how, her parents would hire him to work the farm. And as long as he was there, he could keep the other kids his age working hard. But if he wasn't there, they would be lazy. They would, do nothing. And they talk about in that story that he was somebody that could control others, but that also there's a bit of a warning in the story that he needed, we got to watch out for this guy. Like he needs to be crushed is what, the
Yes.
word they say in it. Yeah. Because they saw where he could go with this. And if you have a chance, look up the entire source. I had to truncate it, but it goes into more detail that, his first vision was a vision of a pure, simple youth or something. But then they're like, but then his second vision after that, and I just think that when someone reads that, if you're a believer, you see it. Let me see if I can explain this. When you're a believer and you see that, well, it's very binary. If people want to crush him, they are working for the devil, right? They're in the mobs that are chasing him later or whatever. So you see that as kind of like a story that's pro Joseph. And if you're in an Exmo or just someone who's kind of more nuanced, you'll look at that story and see, hey, wait a minute, these guys could see where this was going, and so I think a lot of times with this book in general, just all the stories, I do try to stay pretty neutral, and I think people will be able to pick out different things from it. It's got a kind of a broad appeal. I do have believers that buy it, and we had a comment on the screen a minute ago about that, and I have ex-Mormons that buy it, and they consider it like a great ex-Mormon project, and for me, it's a history project first, an art project first, but I definitely am not drawing necessarily what I believe. It's more, I'm just trying to relate the way that the people tell the stories. So.
And then if I could just say one other thing, Bill, and then I'll go into the background for a minute.
Yeah.
And then you bookended that first story with another very positive story about Joseph Smith, where it actually works. He looks into a hat with stones. These are the 3 black stones, which I'd never heard of in any other source, and maybe you hadn't either. But these 3 black stones, right, which are portrayed as being before he finds his first seer stone, his under the tree, right? At least in your chronology.
Yeah.
But it's while he's on that trek, and he stops at that tavern, Green's.
Yeah, Samuel Green. And just as a asterisk there, I placed that story there. It's a complicated story. It could have been placed in, you could place it after.
Right.
I just found it convenient that it was along the way of the story, and it works well kind of with the narrative, I guess.
And there's this guy there at he's sitting there using these to read the fortunes of young girls, trying to make some money along the way. And there's a guy who's Judge Clark, isn't it? And he's at the tavern, and he has lost his wallet. And this is not, the wallet that I have. It's a big fat Herkin thing that they would put in, I think, in the big pocket on the side or something like that.
That's right.
And he's lost it, and he can't find it. And he says to Joseph, he sees what he's doing. He doesn't know him. He says, well, why don't you put your rock in your hat and tell me where my wallet is? And Joseph does it. And he says, oh, well, did you stop at the ford, this muddy ford on the river? And I don't know what river it was, on this river coming here. He goes, well, yeah, I did. And he says, well, that's where you lost your wallet, where you've been over to do something, and it went down the river, and it's been caught against a branch that is down in the river. So it's further downstream. And the Judge Clark then goes back to look for it. And he, according to the story, then he kind of looks for it where Joseph Smith indicated it would be, which would be downstream of where he forded. But then he goes back to the place he forded the stream, and darned if it isn't lying there on the ground.
Right.
And I don't remember hearing that story before, because it was always interesting to me. How is it that Joseph Smith can get and maintain a reputation for finding things if he never really finds anything?
Yeah. That story is pretty cool. Like at the end of it, it says, that's the beginning of his fame, right? From there on, his fame grew. And it's funny because the Samuel Green who's telling the story says, that's ridiculous. Like, he got it way wrong. It wasn't down the stream. It was right here in the mud. But, it's for Judge Clark, it was a big deal. And he's on a circuit, I guess, and traveling. And maybe he's telling that story. Maybe it's growing in that way. So let's see. I forgot what I was going to say. What was the other part you were talking about?
Well, Judge Clark in the wallet, and obviously Judge Clark sees he. I found my wallet by
Oh,
looking close to the place, he said, but he's seeing that, and other
mhm,
people would look at that and say, "Well, yeah, but he got it wrong because it
mhm.
wasn't there. He didn't say it was there where he forded the stream. He said it was downriver and caught against a branch, and that's not
Yeah.
true. And it's a forded place where everybody fords. It's muddy. This is the obvious place where he would be most
Mhm.
likely to lose his wallet. So they would chalk it up to a lucky guess."
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But I think that, and what I'm posing at the end is the question people are still asking today. Believers, definitely believers are asking this is like, is there something special about this stone? Because these are not hit. The way I portrayed it in the book is like he's using these three stones. They're not even real. Yet somehow he gets it right. Is it a lucky guess, or did he somehow channel inspiration there?
Yeah.
So even today, some people say, well, the stone, there is something to the stone, like that's important. Or is it just inspiration? Right.
Yes. Is the power inside Joseph Smith, or
Right.
is it in the stone? Is it like Dumbo and the feather?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Were there things as you put this book together, as RFM's pointing out, there's stories in here that I thought I had dug everywhere.
yeah.
You start with D. Michael Quinn's book and you work your way out from there.
hmm
And I felt like I knew all the stories, even to the point where there's a story you left out just to make a joke. There's a story where Lorenzo Saunders tells us about a time that Joseph Smith Sr. is in the tavern and he gets his penis measured, right? Like he's drinking too much and he claims to have big genitals or something. And so
hmm
Lorenzo Saunders in this source talks, so there's all these connecting stories that are just
hmm
crazy that are
hmm
taking place in the same tavern of other stories that you're sharing about Joseph Smith's folk magic, for instance. And I'm just curious, as you dove deep into this, and you're having a weird look on your face, RFM. Are you familiar with this story?
I think you mentioned it to me before. I was just thinking that, yeah, Joseph Smith Sr. had hands.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, he did. Okay. So as you dove deep into the information, Mark, what kind of what were some of the stories that really stuck out to you? Whether you included them or not in the book, what were some of the things that you were like, wow, that's kind of unique or crazy, or you weren't expecting it?
Um, well, let's see. I mean, there is just a plethora of stories around Martin Harris that are fantastic. And I tried to, we haven't even seen him in this book yet, right?
Right.
But he will become a character later, obviously.
Even though it's
And
dedicated to him.
yeah, and the whole thing is going to be dedicated to him, really. So it's, but he has so many great stories. I think the one that we like to toss around to people that are out of the churches, that he saw Jesus as a deer, on a road. He was talking with him. But there's other great stories as well. I did a sketch in the back of when he encounters the devil, kind of a like creature.
Yeah, that kind of
Road.
scared me because you have
Yeah.
some sketches in the back of your book, which I looked at and I really enjoyed. And it looks like some of them will figure in the next book, like this particular one. If I can hold it
Mhm.
up here. Can you
Mhm.
see the toad in the box with the plates?
Mhm.
Can you see that there? Because I can't really see because it's in front of my face. But that was really cool. And then you've got this one about going across the road in front of Martin Harris, who you explained to me before the show was Martin Harris. And that is an absolutely freaky type picture right
Yeah.
there, right over here.
Yeah.
It was like the first sighting of Groot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you've got those trees and his horses are rearing up and he sees this thing. I mean, that creeps me out. And that's amazing to do with pen and ink.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just, I'm trying to write this where we get gradually introduced. So, we learn about buried treasure, but I haven't really gotten into the spirits and the demons yet, but that's coming. That's volume 2. And I actually did start kind of at what is going to be volume 2, and I decided to work back a little bit and do some world building in this first volume. So,
Oh, wonderful.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah. I
And
just
then you
want to
got,
couple these up.
So,
by the way, this is Sally Chase. I'm sure all the male members of the audience fixated right here on this. This
Yeah.
is Sally Chase. And I thought it was just wonderful and unexpected that Sally Chase in your book turns out to be something of a hottie.
Yeah. That's not the only interpretation. I think there's another story out there where someone's kind of visualized her as more of like a hag type character. So, I
Yeah.
chose not to do that. I'm drawing this, so I'm just
Yes, you get to do it. And
You
it
get
was
to
much
tell the
more
story.
interesting that way. And she comes across as much more powerful. I mean,
Mhm.
you dress her in red. You've got this wonderful full page illustration of her with her. There you go, with the
Mhm.
stone, right?
Yeah.
There's a great deal of power that I sense coming from this image.
Well, aside, I wanted Sally also to be someone that Joseph, he wants to be like that. Like everyone in the village is, going to her to ask for, advice on where they've lost different items and their cows and things. And so I have Lumen just kind of bounce into the story for a minute, and
Hmm.
it inspires Joseph, intrigues him. But Sally lives there, so she is going to be much more of a mentor. And I just figured, if she was attractive and she was someone that he could look up to. She's a little bit older than Joseph, but in that way, it's might be something that he would really gravitate towards her.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought that was just a fascinating, wonderful choice on your part. And then there's Lumen Walters, who,
Mhm.
by the way, I've heard of before, but here and there, and
Mhm.
he's always been sort of this ephemeral kind of character in my
Mhm.
mind, not able to get a good fix on him. But one of the wonderful things about your book and drawing him is that now he is fixed permanently in my mind. And I
Mhm.
see him here possibly as sort of we talk about the hero's journey, right?
Mhm.
And he's sort of maybe the Gandalf to Joseph Smith's Frodo,
Mhm.
or the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Joseph Smith's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. So, he is, but he's also going to be antagonistic. Like he comes back into the story a couple times, and at some point, he's the one kind of called in to try to locate the plates when Joseph's hiding them around the neighborhood and stuff. So, yeah, we'll see him again. He just makes a brief appearance right
Oh,
now, and
great.
yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm
I
glad.
love that you make him kind of look, as you're saying here, like a scoundrel, which if you know a little bit of the history about Lumen Walters, he kind of comes into, this, of course, I'm telling this to the audience, but he comes into town, he doesn't stay too long, it seems like, and he's kind of out of there. And there's a lot of anecdotal kind of data pointing to him being dishonest. And
Mhm.
so kind of painting that picture of him and letting us see both Sally as this attractive scryer in town, and Lumen Walters as maybe more of a scoundrel, less attractive kind of person.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
kind of fun to have that mix up of character that Joseph Smith is almost assuredly, on some level, even if they didn't look anything like this, he's pulling from both of these
Mhm.
people to figure out how he's going to be a scryer or a person who looks into peepstones and try to emulate whatever qualities he saw as beneficial from both these two who had some impact on him, at least to some
Mhm.
degree.
Yeah, you make a good point, Bill, too, that the contrast between the characters is pretty interesting. Sally is, just a neighborhood girl, and Lumen, is this traveling vagabond type guy, but yet he can speak Latin, like he's been educated well. And there's all these rumors about where, his life, running away at 6 and things like that. And, my kid's 7. I don't think he could survive outside for 24 hours. So, like I don't know how this guy ran away at the age of 6, but there's, he's just in itself like a fascinating character. And I had a lot of conversations with Johnny Stevenson about him. And, that I don't know if we're familiar with him, but
Yeah.
Johnny would find all kinds of, information about
Oh, yeah.
Lumen and how he was unattractive. And at some point, this is probably after the fact, but he got like pitted face possibly from like smallpox or something. This
Right.
was, yeah, it's just like, and we do have a description of like what he looked like. So anyway.
Yeah, and that was interesting to me too, because your research into this book is extraordinary. And that you, even in the footnote, mention that you are drawing Lumen Walters after a description that was given of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, at least his wardrobe, you could interpret his face in any way you want. But yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the one place in the whole book that made me actually laugh out loud was where Lumen Walters is out there reciting his incantations while all the men are digging this massive hole. And then all of a sudden he starts to become aware of a young person in the bushes watching what's going on. And then there's this question mark, and he says, "Who the hell is that?" And it's Joseph, right? Because he snuck outside to go watching what the men were doing.
Yeah. Right. And he was supposed to be pretty vulgar. So that, Brigham Young mentions that, all these people knew each other, but Brigham Young mentions that, who we think is Lumen anyway, that he's talking about, that this guy would swear, he said, if you love swearing, it was beautiful to your ears, but as for me, I would leave the room, or something like that.
Oh yeah, because Brigham Young's ears were just so chaste.
Saintly.
Yeah, who the hell is that? So I guess that's the PG version of what he probably really said.
Possibly, yeah.
But of course, this whole scene is created in your mind, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we have to go on there is actually from Fayette Lapham's account. And again, there's a conjecture that the man with a dark colored stone that Joseph sees there is Lumen. That's just conjecture, but I thought it was really cool. And I think who came up with that? It was I don't remember, but there's Dale Morgan. Dale Morgan was the one that first thought that perhaps they were both one and the same, this person from Fayette Lapham's account. So
and Fayette Latham, he was one of the fellow money diggers, wasn't he?
He was, I don't think I ever have him. We'd have to ask
Dan Vogel,
Don Bradley. He's done a lot of research with Fayette Lapham, but or Dan Vogel, he probably would know. But I don't think that he was ever involved. He was a friend of the Smiths, particularly Smith Sr., and Joseph Sr. would go and kind of talk to him periodically, and he gleaned a ton of details about the early Book of Mormon and stuff.
Maybe I'm confusing it. Is he the person who in part 2 is going to be giving the wonderful account of Joseph Smith Sr. telling him about Joseph Smith finding the toad in the box that transfigured itself into a man?
That would be... No, I think that's somebody else.
Boy,
I'm sorry, I could be.
That's 2 for 2. But that's where this
there's the
great
Saunders,
comes from, right?
Yeah, the Saunders.
Lawrence.
There's Orson Saunders has an account about the toad. Of course, Willard Chase has, Willard Chase gives the first kind of account of that, and then Orson Saunders gives one that's building off of that. Mm-hmm. I'd have to check and make sure I'm giving the right name, but this is more extravagant. Willard's is a creature that comes out of the box, whereas Orson's, if I'm getting the name right, is more it grows. The creature grows and continues to grow until it has it's as large as the mountain. He has glittering eyes, and he strikes Joseph and he flies down the hill. Yeah, so it's bigger. You can tell that story has grown.
Yeah.
So.
There are parts of this that, I don't know, there's just parts of this narrative that are so interesting to me. When I first joined the church, 1997, I think, and or 96. And when I joined, I learned this story that, this guy named Abner Cole has taken Joseph Smith's manuscript, and he's going into the Grandin print shop at night, and he's reproducing it under the strangest of name, the Book of Pukey, I think is what it ends up being called.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's making a vomit reference or what he's doing, but it's kind of a cool name. Mm-hmm. And that's all we get. That's all we know about Abner Cole. But what we learn, through studying this treasure digging history, is that Abner Cole, who produced the Book of Pukey under the name of Obadiah Dogberry, is also one of these treasure diggers who's highly involved. He's got things going on his own property, where Joseph Smith and Lumen Walters and doesn't it just kind of get a little crazy at some point? All of this history, when you look at it in the big picture, it's kind of insane the amount of, I want to use the word fantastical amount of information that comes across in all of these folk magic tales.
Yeah. my wife and I were just kind of talking about how all these stories, we still do the same thing today. Like the thing about these stories is they give. Well, let me back up. So like today we might tell stories, kind of over like, our families all have these stories that build faith or whatever, right? And we might have a story about an angel or something, and we just tell it within the family, and then occasionally you'll have someone at like church on Fast Sunday, and they might say something, and you're kind of like, "Ooh, I don't really believe that," but for them it's really powerful, and it's like what gives them faith to believe and follow the teachings of the church or the prophets. Well, I think in Joseph's time a lot of these fantastic stories were the same thing for them. We look at them today and it's hard for us to believe that that Martin Harris talked to a deer that was also Jesus, but for him, or like the sword, the first page that I have there with the sword, right? For him, he saw in vision a sword being let out of heaven. It was like a fiery sword, and it pointed the cardinal directions and then pointed at the hill Cumorah. It's kind of hard for us to be like, okay, that's real, but for him, it gave him a reason to like believe Joseph. Like it validated his choices in life and selling all his property and, and that kind of stuff. So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So what I thought was beautiful, the reason I say that is I put the map up here on the screen. One of the things I think that's beautiful about this creation of a book that you've put together is that you made all this really tangible. As I was flipping through and reading it over the last couple of days, and I know these stories now for the most part. Again, I think there was one that RFM mentioned that I also didn't know about. And as I'm reading each of these stories, I'm seeing the illustrations. I'm seeing the maps of the very locations where these things are happening. I'm reading the witness accounts from the sources where you're drawing these vignettes from. And what I'm left with is just this overwhelming having to confront it and to deal with it and not be able to dismiss it, which I think is something Mormonism has done for a couple of hundred years. And this book, I think the beautiful thing it does is it makes all of this so tangible. It makes Joseph Smith's treasure digging tangible. It makes these witness accounts tangible. It makes the locations that they took place in tangible. And again, I'll just say it, it really forces all of us, as any person who reads this, to confront this early history that Mormonism would want nothing more really than to not have any of us know it exist. I think to some degree they have almost completely removed treasure digging or folk magic. I think it's the whole reason we switched over from a seer stone to Nephite spectacles in the first place, both in the first generation with Joseph Smith Jr. himself, and then preceding historians and others. Other accounts got preference because if we deal with the seer stone, we have to confront Joseph Smith's treasure digging. And I think your book, no motives attached to it. I think your book beautifully encourages us to confront that history.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it's really a shame that a lot of these stories aren't told because, there's so many like just details that are fascinating. You'll get stories about Joseph coon hunting, stealing watermelons from watermelon patch, just kind of like just random things like this, little details that make him more human. But also you get, like you said, the fantastic things, which when you start to see them all together, it is a lot. There's a lot of things going on that people would interpret to be faithful.
Yeah, in some ways, he comes across as a Huckleberry Finn type character.
Yeah, yeah, that's
of course,
kind of. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, because I mean, there's a whole scene in the graveyard with him taking the dead cat and swinging it around in order to, I think, raise up a spirit or something.
Yeah. And of course, like, was it Indian Joe? Aren't they digging up a corpse at one point? It's I think
him and Muff Potter and the doctor, whatever
the
his
doctor,
name was.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that gets killed by Indian Joe.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that was sort of why we added the subtitle "Collected Tales of Joseph Smith" as well, because we were sort of thinking of like Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn type of, these little short stories that kind of get stitched together. Yeah.
One of the things, just on a personal note, is when I confronted a number of these stories, including the one about Martin Harris and Dear Jesus,
Mhm.
the whole backdrop of Mormonism, its whole foundation is built on all these fantastic stories
Mhm.
of a spiritual and supernatural kind of manner. And it's also based on witnesses. But when I started finding out that Martin Harris saw all kinds of fantastic and odd things that had nothing to do with these foundation stories,
Mhm.
and other people did too, it started
Mhm.
making me think, people back then would see all kinds of things that
Mhm.
probably never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I like to think of it like with the treasure digging kind of setting too. You're out in the woods. Well, first of all, someone's told a story, right? You've got this backstory of like, somebody got killed and they buried their treasure, they threw in a corpse in the ground or whatever, and then so you've kind of got this ghost story already, and then you're gonna go out in the woods at night with a lantern, and it's gonna be freaky, and I don't know if you guys have ever been out in the woods at night, but imagine you're going out there with this purpose of finding an artifact left by a dead guy or whatever, and there's literally possibly well, in their mind there is actually a ghost or a guardian or some protector they're going to try to defeat or appease in some way, and that might involve a little bit of magic and folk magic, a little bit, perhaps even a blood sacrifice of an animal. It's starting to get pretty freaky, and like you can kind of imagine where it would be very easy to see things, and not to mention also a lot of times there'd be a little bit of whiskey involved or something, so yeah, I can just I give them a little bit of slack because what else are they going to do at night too, but
There's no TV.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is the pastime. This is, I consider it the early 19th century version of the lotto.
Yeah.
Or Farmville.
I don't get that reference.
That's a social media game that occupies hours of people's time.
Well,
Well, there's this huge pod at the end of this rainbow that you can get like the lotto, right?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
always hear about people winning it, but you never win it yourself.
And
right.
that's it. They put it in the newspapers, right? There's all these newspaper reports with people actually having found stuff according to the claim of the newspaper, or they'll say, so-and-so thought they found some things and you'd leave it up to you to decide. But you guys were mentioning here, this pirate's treasure. I wanted to include because Captain Kidd is one of these stories that, on the outside of Mormonism, there's a lot of critics of Mormonism who are insisting that this story has a place in how Joseph came to use certain words like Moroni or Cumorah. And almost assuredly, he would have known about some of these stories. These would have been his version of comic books in the 1800s, right? They're telling of these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, Joseph Smith did have access to books, and we know at least when it comes to like Adam Clark's commentary, he was reading at least some things voraciously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I imagine you went back and read Mormonism Unveiled, the Eber D. Howe, and the Philastrius Hurlbut stuff, right?
Yeah.
And when I joined the church, again, going back to the 90s, it was clear to me reading what the church had to say, which was very little, and reading what apologists had to say, which was pretty significant, that we couldn't trust that book. We couldn't trust the witnesses in it. We couldn't trust the person who funded the project, which I think is Eber D. Howe, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think Philastrius Hurlbut he sent out to collect the affidavits. And what I found is I started to think more critically, and I went back and read all those accounts, was that I originally dismissed it because my faith and its defenders told me to. But when I went back to read it, what I discovered was there was just too much smoke. There was too many witnesses and too many stories, and some of them were unconnected. They were connected stories, but they were unconnected witnesses, to the point where it just felt like Joseph Smith, in an overwhelming way, was absolutely treasure digging all over the place. And I know Dan Vogel did I think it's in Dialogue, and it's an article about Joseph Smith's treasure digs in the Palmyra area.
Yep.
And what you learn there, I think there's 17 of them, 17 treasure digs in the area.
Yeah.
And what it becomes is that, Joseph says he quit after getting $14 a day for a month or whatever, $14 a month or whatever, and he just calls it quits. And the church just walks away from the story at that point. But as you're showing in your book, there's a plethora of these accounts.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely far more than, the rewritten kind of history that we get about Joseph. There's so many. And, Dan Vogel's very careful, in his counting, the way he counts as well, to include ones that are pretty likely to be Joseph, but there's a lot more too. And that are more, obviously, like Joseph became really famous as a treasure digger, as a seer. And so if you find a hole back in your farm, you probably are at some point going to blame Joseph Smith. So there's probably some level that are not necessarily Joseph Smith, but are said to be attributed to him. But there's also a lot that are very just kind of like we just have a fragment of a treasure dig story, and there's so much there that we don't have. So, I was gonna say also, Porter Rockwell says that everybody was digging, and it's just that they most of them would not admit to it. And even when you're looking at the Hurlbut affidavits, different people will call other people out in their own statements, but they won't say in their own statements that they were involved.
Yeah.
And then
I joined Amway for a little bit. I know I would have been on a treasure dig in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And what the statement said is that what other people were doing privately, Joseph Smith did openly.
That's right. Yeah. And then I was also going to say, Bill, is that you if you look at only the Hurlbut affidavits, then it's people today still say, oh, that was just an angry guy. But then the Kelly brothers come in a couple, I don't know how many years later, but maybe 20 or 30 years later, and they're from the RLDS church, and they're kind of there to go around and get some statements about, was Joseph was Solomon Spaulding involved and all this stuff. And but a lot of their stories that they collect are matching up pretty well with what Hurlbut collected. So and then you take all these other the printer, just so many different people collected stories. And I wish there was more. We don't have like Samuel Lawrence, we don't have his statement. It'd be really cool if we had that one. And
so based on the Kelly brothers, Dan, it would seem like it probably wasn't a case of undue influence on the part of Eber D. Howe or Philastus Hurlbut in getting these people to say what it is he wanted them to say.
I don't know I would say that I'm sure he was, trying to get people to say stuff. I mean, he didn't care so much about certain details, and he's trying to get the story that he wants. But at the same time, those details still come through. There's a lot there that we can still glean out of it, even if it's a really, slanted story.
Right. And when you say 20 years later, these Kelly brothers went back, and they obviously, if they're reorganized, then they revere Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
And they're getting statements that are similar to the Hurlbut affidavits.
Yeah. Or at least some details are getting corroborated or whatever. And then also you can go to Lucy Mack's own story, her own history of her family, and there's a lot of details in there. Or the Whitmers, we get a lot of interesting details there. And Martin Harris, a lot of these guys are believers, and they're telling us these stories as well. Porter Rockwell even,
Right. The reason I bring up that undue influence argument is because I first encountered that. I think it was Hugh Nibley's book, The Myth Makers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where he's trying to address the Hurlbut affidavits. Can I have one really important question I want to ask you, and it's based on my favorite footnote.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to read this to you. These are your own words.
Oh, okay.
And I want you to expatiate on this. Page 71. This is when Sally is telling Joseph Smith to put his head in the hat. So he can see what's going on with her stone that he's letting him look at in her hat. This is before he's found his own stone, and where he's going to look ultimately and find the location of his stone, which is like maybe 150 miles away. And he goes on that trek in order to find it. Okay, here's your words. You're smiling. I know you know what this is and what's coming. I was pretty annoyed. This is you speaking. I was pretty annoyed that the artists were taking the fall for why members didn't know about Joseph Seer stone. And even now, so many illustrations and reenactments show him just glancing down into the hat or shielding it with his hand. So I had a bit of fun having Sally instruct him that he must bury his face in his hat. Tell us about your being annoyed about artists taking the fall for why it is that members didn't know about Joseph Seer stone.
Well, you guys probably know more about this than me, but I'm pretty sure the church is pretty careful about what is being, illustrated.
They govern every aspect from the initial sketches to the finished product, and it doesn't get published.
Whoa, hold on. I thought we blame the artist here. This is where we blame the
well,
artist.
the church has, and they've done it in a number of places. I think it's in the essay, but I know it's also in the 2015 October, was it, photo op of the Seer stone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I saw the Seer stone, that honestly, that was the first time that I didn't even know about it. I was kind of like, I may have heard about it, but it blew me away. I was like, holy smokes. And then
did you not go to church? Did you miss a lot of church up to that point?
Actually at that point I'm already out, but I'm just saying I was a very, faithful member. I got all my seminary plaques and everything, but I had never heard of that. And so it was shocking to me that, here we have all these drawings of Joseph, the way he was translating with, literally he's got his fingers on the plates, uncovered. He's looking at it and reading it. So, and then, it's one thing to be like, well, we just didn't know. And, so here's the new history. Actually, it was under the cover the whole time and he looked in the stone. But then they went ahead and said, well, is the artist's fault. You guys should have read that, magazine from the 80s or something, to know your history. But so yeah, and then after that, to overcorrect, the new artists were illustrating Joseph just kind of doing this sort of thing, shielding it just a little, but he still looks like he's doing something, but more presentable, I guess. But all the sources have him, except for the one I point out with the candle, almost all of them have him with his face in the hat. So
right. Well, it was a desperate and transparently obvious attempt to shift blame from the leadership of the church, which is where it belongs, as to how it is that they have represented in artwork over the decades the translation process of the Book of Mormon, because they are the ones who, from sketches, from initial concepts, all the way through, it doesn't get published until the Correlation Committee says, go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were you doing there, Bill?
I was going to do some translating here. I got my Seer stone.
There it is.
I've got my Joseph Smith hat.
Yeah.
You will have white hat. Yep.
Yeah, look at that.
And another thing I liked about your book is that it gives, I think, the dignity to people to go ahead and take their stories at face value. I mean, when you have Joseph Smith looking in the hat, right? You don't have him seeing nothing and having maybe the thought balloon saying, okay, how can I make this up to be convincing? You actually have him seeing stuff. Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, exactly. I try to take it at face value. And again, I don't believe that. But I just thought it makes a very cool American fantasy kind of story if we take those as the believer, or as the narrator has told us the story happened. So there's going to be a story about demons and things like that, a giant perched on the barn, so I'm actually it's going to be a giant, a 8-foot tall guy, I guess, on a barn where, if you're a skeptic, you're like, well, that's probably just a guy up there in a in a sheet, scaring them or something.
Yeah.
But if you're a believer, it could be, you could interpret it some other way. But I'm drawing it just kind of as they have stated in the source document. So
Yeah. Is that like a scene out of the Mel Gibson movie Signs?
yeah, they might. Maybe that's where they got the inspiration.
The alien up on the barn. Am I misremembering that? My listeners can let me know, but I thought there was a flash of an alien. You don't know it's an alien yet, but a figure up on top of the barn.
I don't think are they ever on top of the barn? I don't know.
Let us know, everybody out there.
Yeah,
people are making some weird noise, but I'm just actually making the noise of the aliens on the movie Signs, which was just that clicking noise.
Yeah.
Swing away, Bill. Swing away.
Yeah, swing away. He grabs the bat. And that's it. All because Mom, was getting it was in that car accident and told Mel Gibson to give that advice at some later point.
Yes,
not to be revealed at this point in the show, right?
Yes, the word Mel Gibson is one eternal round.
Yeah, at a future point, you'll reveal it later, correct?
Yes. Oh, I love this one, and it's so interesting because you have these big illustrations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you put so much into them that your footnotes are left to explain them for people like me who might not get all the symbolism and the references. It's like your book is full of Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to draw, like I'm a concept artist, I guess, more than a character artist. And so I like to do these sort of objects and things like that to kind of, in a way it helps to build a world. And I that's my strong point. So that's what I try to do. So here we're looking at like Lumen's magical implements.
Right. In his book, which is, of course, he has a book.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like, by the way, hopefully I'm not going to go out on a limb again and have it break off under me, but it looks like some of the diagrams you have here on the left page may come from, is it the layman's that Joseph Smith had?
Yeah. So, well, we have, let's see, actually some of these things are coming off of his medallion, his
talisman, right?
And then some of it is going to be inside of let's see, the Mars dagger, I guess. But both of these are pages straight out of the Magus book, and they're not actually. I think I put in the notes. They're not actually. Oh, cool, Bill. I didn't know you. But Bill's holding up an actual copy of it there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You open this up and it has what demons look like, how to do spells. It came with a little talisman. Yeah. So this is supposed to be the book that was used in that day, that some references are that Joseph had access to.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just kind of speculating there, but according to Abner Cole, it wasn't anything at all. It was just Cicero's orations in Latin that he was reading, not magic in any way. But, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that perhaps there's some magic drawings in there, illustrations.
Yeah. I understand that the chief demon's initials, at least in that book, are RFM. People say there's a special place in hell for me. And I agree. It's called a throne.
We have to look that up off air here.
One of the things you guys were talking about a few minutes ago is there's so much of Joseph Smith treasure digging in Palmyra, in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And we as critics are pretty aware of all these misses with, Spanish silver mines and all that stuff. RFM and I did an episode. I don't remember which order it was in, but it was like sheep bones, gold thrones, and peak stones, all on Miners Hill.
Yeah,
we talked at length about that at excavation of the old Miners Hill and the two that were involved in that project and what all went on there and some of the stories associated. But because there's this plethora of this stuff, and because Joseph is continually being sought after to perform these treasure digs, it becomes inevitable that on some level there were perceived successes. Even though I'm a skeptic, I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't use magic to explain my worldview. And so I don't believe these things happen. But I think that there were people in Joseph Smith's day around him in that neighborhood who believed that he had an ability to find things, and there had to have been events. And we could debate whether Joseph took his neighbor's thing and then put it somewhere so that he could find it and then tell him where it was. Like there's all those possibilities, but at least on some level, we have to acknowledge, even as a critic, that people came to Joseph having trusted that he really could find things, and that somewhere, somehow, there had to have been anecdotal data in that day that led people to believe that.
Right. It doesn't take much success for that to grow. Like, I think Joseph, one of the things I'm trying to bring across in this first book is his ability to kind of read people and here's an example. Martin Harris at one point loses a pin. I think he's like picking his teeth with it, and it flips off and falls in the hay. And it's like a fancy pin. It's not like like a needle. It's like something belonging to his wife, probably, and probably like relationship. His relationship with his wife was kind of strained as it was. So he's like, oh gosh, I've got to find this thing. And then Joseph uses his stone. He's like, use your stone. You have your stone. Use your stone. Help me find it. And he does. And he puts his and Martin Harris assures the audience, the future audience, that Joseph didn't look out of his hat. He kept his head in there, and he just put his hand straight out and moved a stick, and there it was, So even just something like that, get Martin Harris, he's going to go tell his neighbors about that. And people in these rural towns are going to, things like this, stories are going to spread. And if you hit the bottom of, or you hit something and it sounds like a chest, or you heard a jingling of coins, you're going to believe you were close, So.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, when you sent the book to me, where maybe RFM, you can show it, the bigger bookmark that shows that something else is on the way. Yeah. Tell us a little bit. This obviously has been successful enough, and that you've got a second project coming. Tell us about that one.
Yeah. So, it was, thanks to all the pre-orders people did and my patrons that supported me through this, it was successful, and I just really appreciate, I can't thank everybody enough. Sunstone also, really helped out. So, this is like a continuation. I'll be able to fund the next book. And the next book will focus on 1822, maybe going into 1823 a little bit. We'll be meeting. We'll start to encounter some stories that we're more familiar with, of course, once we start to see the angel / treasure guardian from Cumorah.
Yeah. Is he going to look like the guy that Captain Kidd killed in the first part of this book?
That would be cool. What a twist. No, well, no, he's going to...
Have you already drawn him? Have you already figured him out?
Yeah. Okay, so if you go to the back, just as a spoiler, you go to the back, that page where you will see there's an entire page of Moroni sketches. And the reason that the way I'm going to do it is... I'm
guessing this is it.
No, well, actually, that's him as well.
There's Moroni, right?
Yes, but go back, or possibly Nephi, depending on how you interpret it. But go back a little bit. There's a sketch of.
Is it this one on the screen?
Are these? Oh.
Yeah, that's it. So on that page we have lots of versions of Moroni. So the way I interpret it is sort of he's able to appear as needed, kind of.
Is this one? Yeah. Is this one you were talking about?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. If I can just jump in for just a quick second, Dr. Moore, and that we only got like 2 minutes left on this, but Dr. Moore has promised to match all donations that come in for the next 5 minutes, and that was like 3 minutes ago. So for anybody willing to drop $5, $10, $20 into the donations there, right to the right of the video you're watching on YouTube. Thank you, Dr. Moore. He's done that several times at this point, and it is much appreciated. We survive on the donations. So folks, if you could donate a few bucks, and Dr. Moore will match that, and we probably got another maybe 45 seconds left. So thank you.
Yep. But yeah, so that's it. It's just Moroni. I'm going to have him appear in various forms, even through the stories. We have the Whitmers talking about him looking different.
Are you ever going to have him crawling out from under Sister Whitmer's chicken coop?
Hiding under there, right? Yeah. That's I want that story in there. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Everything. They see a
so
guy
many
walking
good ones.
along the road while they're going, on
Mhm.
their wagon, and geez, that was
Yep.
Moroni. You
Yep.
see some homeless guy
Mhm.
hiding under the chicken coop. Well, that's
Yep.
Moroni.
Yeah.
It's like you see a deer walking down in the forest. It's like Bambi, but no, it's not Bambi. That's Jesus. And
Yep.
everything had this spiritual. I mean, if you talk about looking through spiritual eyes, everything you see has a spiritual component to it.
Yeah.
And anything can be anything else as long as it sort of matches your worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be either good or it can be bad. But I think it's unlikely that, except for this whole idea about Moroni, that they'd be looking at somebody, just a regular guy hiding under a chicken coop or walking down the road, that they think that's an angel of God. But maybe they would. I don't know.
Yeah. There's some really fantastic tales, and I can't wait to draw them. So
yeah. By the way, I had a question, and this is a geeky question, and I apologize. We got to have some callers call in. But you, as such an artist and creative person, did you ever feel your artistic impulses constrained by having to hew to the historical accounts?
You mean like
You can't make stuff up. You have set out your goal that you're going to create these vignettes that are going to represent the historical accounts. Did you ever feel constrained by that?
No, I don't know. I guess I've been trained that way. For 10 years, I worked at an aerospace company, and I had to I had to be creative within limits, So to me, I think it's pretty cool. It's like it gives you your boundaries, and then you get to experiment within those. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I just thought I'd ask that question. Did you have anything else, Bill, or did you want to open up to?
Yeah, we'll do the
callers?
phone calls here. I just wanted to ask one last thing, which is when I look on the back of your book, I see the toad here, and the name of it here is Lumen Books. Is this kind of the publisher name that you created to publish the books under?
Right. Yeah. So, we're self-published, but my wife is an attorney, and she helped me set up business and everything. So, we have Lumen Books as the publishing arm of Elwood Studios. So
I love it. I love it. And I'm assuming Deseret Book probably won't be carrying this.
I didn't ask him, but yeah.
I would imagine their answer, right?
They carried Rough Stone Rolling.
They carried Grant Palmer's Insider's View of Mormonism for a short time.
Whoa, no way. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they once in a while something slips in, something gets past everybody,
Yeah.
At some point, if you need a title for one of your books, you could do portrait of a prophet as a young man. Okay, never mind. We'll see if anybody gets that.
All right, so I'm going to put the number up, RFM, and Mark, feel free to help us out with this. If you know how our show works, if you don't, you'll see what we're doing. But folks, you can call us at 435-200-3478 or 435-200.
Mark?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. There you go. It took me a while to figure it out. Hold it up there.
I was unprepared.
Be proud. Okay, there you go.
That's right. If anybody tuned in just then, they thought that was like a white supremacist live show that we were doing or something. But
hopefully no one's
do that at all. We've got a Google Voice number that we use, and we tried to come up with using those letters that each number represents on a phone. Tried to come up with a cool word, and we were left with either fist or dirt. That was our two choices.
We went with fist.
So we went with fist. Caller number one, you are on the line. Your name?
Sam Wilson.
Sam, you're on the show live, Mormonism Live with Mark Elwood.
What is this? The Falcons calling?
And Bill Reel.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So what do you got for us, my friend?
Well, I just wanted to compliment the show tonight, and then tell Mark that's a heck of a thing that he's doing.
Oh, thanks.
He's obviously done research, done his artwork, and I've been thinking, I don't know how old is Mark, around 34, 35.
Do you say
Anyway,
how?
in the zeitgeist that's going on is there should be a graphic novel done next.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's kind of where he's working towards.
Yeah.
And then an HBO show. How about that?
I thought the same thing, by the way, caller, which is there is this idea out there that Mormonism would make a wonderful historical based TV series. And
I mean, it could be gritty.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what Mark has done is lined out the very first stage of what that could look like and how incredibly interesting a TV series about Mormonism and Joseph Smith would be.
Yeah.
It could be Sopranos on steroids.
Yeah, I'm with you. There would be a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't even have to stretch the truth that far. You just have to go back to the real truth.
Right. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, it's not. Sometimes reality is crazier than fiction, isn't it?
And this is cool what this guy's doing. I just want to put that in.
Yeah.
I love what you guys are doing. You guys hear that every time.
Perfect. Thank you, my friend.
Keep doing it.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Guys.
And I never grow tired of hearing it. By the way, Sam Wilson, did you hear? I don't know if they can hear me. I mean, we got the Falcon calling.
Yeah, the Falcon. I don't know. Sam Wilson, is that a TV show?
Do you know who Steve Rogers is?
Steve Rogers was the Bionic Man.
Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing.
Wasn't it?
No, Steve Rogers is Captain America.
Oh, okay. Yes. Who's the Bionic Man? Steve what?
It'll come to me, but Sam Wilson is the Falcon. Okay, so anyway. So extra credit for anybody who can come in with the name of the Bionic Man, played by Lee Majors back in the 70s. That was Steve Austin, a man barely alive.
Not to be confused with the beer swiggling Stone Cold Steve Austin, but
right. We can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Yeah, my favorite was when he fought Andre the Giant as Bigfoot. That was
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think that was kind of like the Bionic Man's version of jumping the shark.
It was it. That's when stuff went south. Brandon, did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right.
You are caller number 2 on Mormonism Live tonight with Mark Elwood, the author and illustrator of The Glass Looker, Collected Tales of Joseph Smith. What do you got for us tonight, my friend?
First of all, thank you so much for taking the call.
You're welcome.
Oh my God. Seriously. I'm a huge fan. I love the show. RFM. This guy's got so much charisma. I feel like I would follow him down any path, like Turtle Marriage, whatever.
That's all it takes, my friend, is some charisma.
So we're talking about what do you call it? Like a graphic novel for Joseph Smith? Is that what?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
That's killer, man.
Yeah.
Killer.
Hey.
So anyway, I have a question.
Sure.
Number one, who was the greatest prophet of all time?
The greatest prophet of all time.
Denver Snuffer. Why is that funny? He is my favorite prophet. I talked to him on the phone yesterday and I said, how's my favorite prophet doing?
If you're talking Mormonism, you have to go with Joseph Smith. I can't imagine anybody else, President Hinckley, Howard W. Hunter, George Albert Smith. And how are those guys going to even compare? They didn't come up with anything.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of these guys love, a lot of my friends, they love Gordon B. Hinckley. He was a cool guy.
yeah, he was a good guy. He just didn't prophesy.
He lost a lot of faith. I lost a lot of respect for him when he got a little bit silly, right, with the interview, talking about, I don't know that we teach that. I don't know that we believe that.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was a child at the time, but I just thought, like, I know that. You know?
Right. I still believe it. They're still teaching me this stuff.
But anyways, one last thing before I go. Joseph Smith, though, I think about him as a man, one man to another, right? We're kind of like in this androgynous phase right now, where we're just sort of unsure about what the genders mean, blah, blah, blah. At the time, when you're Joseph Smith, in that time, you're a dude who has command over all these people, and you're just picking off one lady after another. You're just banging and banging and banging, right? And it's as a heterosexual, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I look at that guy and I think this guy's kind of a badass.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, I don't know that I think
I
that.
So-
All right, so I'm going to move on from that call, RFM.
Did you just hang up on my fan, Brandon?
I did, only because I'm not going to sit idly by, I guess, while we call traumatic behavior like cool and macho, because that seemed pretty unhealthy when you're talking about using spiritual rhetoric to manipulate people, especially young women, underage girls, into sexual encounters. I don't know that I can really make that cool.
Okay, I just want Brandon to know I'm against your being cut off by Bill Reel, and I'm going to lodge a formal complaint with the FCC.
Josh, you are on Mormonism Live with Mark Elwood, Radio Free Mormon, and myself. Mark is the author and illustrator of the Glass Looker Collected Tales of Joseph Smith. What do you have for us tonight, my friend?
Oh, first off, I want to make the comment that today's episode makes me feel like I'm listening to old Coast to Coast radio show episodes. If you guys remember that, it was like an old radio show from like the 90s and the early aughts where people could just discuss like supernatural stuff, like things
Art
that
Bell.
can't be-
Coast to coast.
Yeah,
Art Bell, yeah.
it kind of reminded me of that, and I just like reading like today's episode kind of like it dawned on me why the church can't really own the folk magic stuff, because they don't want to be the folk magic church. They want like respectability, they want like the nuclear family America. They don't want like a guy like messing around in his backyard or like licking toads or whatnot. They don't want that. They want to be like the church of the CEOs and like the academics. Although they excommunicate academics, and they will probably excommunicate Joseph Smith too if you're a member of the church today. I to say to Mark, I live in Utah in Salt Lake City, and if you're ever around, just let me know, and I'll come and I like to maybe have my book signed or a copy of the book signed by you. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, they don't excommunicate any real scholars, only so-called scholars.
Yeah, only the lazy learners who get it wrong.
Yes, I hate those lazy learners. By the way,
Yeah. We'll take one more here before we get too far. Look at that, lazy learner. We'll take one more call and kind of take the call, and then Mark, I want to give you one more chance to tell people where to get the book. I imagine the benchmark's going to be out of them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Caller, you're the last one here for the night for Mormonism Live. What's the name?
It's funny. My name is Brandon. I'm a different Brandon, though.
Yeah, I can see the voice. I won't hang up on you.
Cut him off, Bill. Cut him off.
Okay, so give us your thoughts with Mark and his incredible book that we're talking about.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I said, just what do you have on your mind regarding Mark and the incredible book that he's put together?
Oh, I had a question for him.
Sure.
His opinion on whether or not the church might take a move in his direction, start maybe doing some more historically accurate art.
Historically accurate what?
He's asking if you think that the church will start creating more accurate art around these events, whether it's treasure digging or other things, that they'll represent these historical events more accurately.
Yeah.
I do think, as these, I think there was a trajectory for the church to try to get away from the treasure digging for a long time, obviously. And I think now it's pretty much accepted. Like, this is the way it is. We do have artists like Anthony Sweat. I think is his name. He's doing a lot of cool stuff. I think even just they just published, Saints Volume 1. Like, we're taking some baby steps towards making it more normalized, I guess. And if you've ever talked to a missionary recently, they have these talking points like, it's just like a cell phone, or Moses. There's all these things in the Old Testament that were magical, but they're not really. It's just the way God works, So I think so. I think the art's going to start reflecting that as well. But they're not going to ever do show some of these stories because of they can always say, well, the sources are are grumpy people that don't believe us or don't believe Joseph Smith was a prophet. So
Right, and to some extent, they already are changing.
Mhm.
Some,
yeah,
like they have a hat
yeah.
in a picture, and
we
Joseph
had-
Smith. Yeah, and Joseph. It may sort of be sitting like I don't know, on the other side of the plates or something, and maybe
Yeah.
you can just see the brim of a hat in one of the pictures. But there is a change toward being more
Mhm.
accurate.
Mhm.
If accuracy's on the, in the end zone, then they may be on the 10-yard line, but at least they've gotten out of their own end
Mhm.
zone and they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was wild that Russell Nelson like posed with the hat there, and then he kind of like caught himself. He's like, maybe this is going to turn into a meme. I better, not do this. But
He didn't really look comfortable to me doing that.
yeah.
Was it
So-
Joy Jones who was with him? Was it Joy Jones who was interviewing him?
I don't know.
It was one of the female leaders in the church at the time, and she's just going, oh yes, I'll believe whatever you tell me.
Oh yeah.
And I think that represents a lot of the followers of Joseph Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, prophets don't lie. They're the most honest people with us.
Well, Bill, prophets tell the truth.
They tell the truth.
And we know that because the prophet said it.
Yeah. Same guy who flew in a plane that didn't do what he said it did. Right.
Oh yeah, that was unfortunate. And there was the incident at Mozambique and the lady in the hat and all those other things. Right.
Yeah. The book was pulled. Yeah. I got all those stories.
You could fill a book with all the stories that Russell Nelson's made up.
So, Mark, let's wrap up. You told people earlier they can get the book, they can order the book on your site, but you're out, theglasslooker.com. But we also put a plug in for Benchmark. If you want to get a physical copy in the next day or 2 or 3, the place to get it is Benchmark Books. You can say hi to Chris Bench there and plug out for Benchmark Books there. I think they're the best bookstore in Salt Lake City to get just about anything that's Mormon related. Anywhere else that the book is available?
Just the website and just on my website, which is theglasslooker.com. And Benchmark. If you really want a copy quick and you happen to live in Utah, make sure you hit up Benchmark.
Perfect.
And I've got a copy here. If people want to contact me, I will let this go for an egregiously inflated price.
And I'll do just a little less. I appreciate it, Mark. This is a beautiful project, and I'm so excited to hear that you're coming out with a second book, and I hope this turns into some sort of series. I think your work is incredible, and I think you are doing a great justice for those who read this to better understand this early folk magic with Joseph Smith in a way that allows them to kind of deal with it all head on, all in one place, rather than kind of having to go locate different stories in 1,000 different places.
Yeah. And I just hope when you get to the polygamy stuff, you'll do it tastefully.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go that far.
Yeah, I don't want to have to carry this in a brown paper wrapper.
Yeah.
It can't be Brandon's favorite book. So you got to do it differently.
Brandon number 1.
Yeah. Brandon number 1. Brandon number 2 was all right. Brandon number 1. So anyway, Mark, thanks a lot for your time tonight, my friend. I hope that you get off this show with us and you look on your site and realize there's about 25, 30 books ordered from this show. So, and I'll touch base with Chris Bench tomorrow and see if he sold a bunch of copies in the next 24 hours.
Well, I really appreciate it. Definitely coming on the show with you guys. I definitely, as I've been working on this, I consumed a lot of your show as well as other podcasts. So it's the least I can do to send you guys a copy because I just love all the content you guys have been making. So
I've thrown a lot of Mormon stuff out over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
This is one I will hang on to, my friend.
Oh, thanks.
That's true.
Yeah. Have a beautiful day, and we'll let you go.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Bye.
RFM, great show. I hope folks took the chance to donate there while Dr. Moore was making the offer. I'll have to check here in a few minutes and see how that went.
I want our listeners to make Dr. Moore a poor man.
Yeah, make him a poor man. It is super kind of him. It's so amazing. We've got a goal. We started off, as you pointed out, we're almost coming up on a year. And we had a goal to raise $20,000 for this year, the first year of Mormonism Live. And I think before the show started, I think we were a little over 12,000. And so I'm curious if anybody sees the numbers there. I'm not on YouTube right now. So if anybody sees the numbers, I'd love to know what we raised tonight. But if anybody out there can help us, if you can help us get to that 20,000, that would be a big help. That's the amount we're trying to raise through YouTube for this show and for our entity, Mormon Discussion Incorporated in general. But a large chunk of it is Mormonism Live. So appreciate everybody who does donate. And for those who don't, we'd love your help too. And appreciate all of you who tune in to listen and to hear the podcast version the next day. Anything else?
60 seconds for, yes. Give 60 seconds for a debate update.
Please do. Yes.
It looks like this is happening by fits and starts.
All three of them.
Yeah. It's like we're having to just like rope and pull Midnight Mormons to this debate that they were so anxious to do, you know, but finally they put up, by the way, on my Facebook page at Radio Free Mormon, there are updates, and there's a whole slew of them because I've documented this whole thing since the end of September. I found out that Midnight Mormons did a couple days ago put up a request for questions, finally. And I talked with Sean McCraney today, the guy who's going to host this debate at his church on November 13th, 6:00 p.m. at the campus church in Murray, Utah. Okay, so I got that out of there. And he had not heard back from Kwaku or anybody about the questions. He actually hadn't heard back from him since the last time I reported. And he said he was probably going to have to get in touch with them either today or tomorrow and let them know he does not have access to social media. He cannot see these questions that have been promoted by their listeners for the debate. And so he's going to have to ask them to do what he asked me to do, which was copy and paste them in an email to him. So, but they're collecting questions. I don't know who's going to show up. I don't know how many's going to show up. I hope all three show up because that was the deal. I know they've manifested a little bit of reluctance to do that because they think somehow it wouldn't be a fair fight. I disagree with that. I think they might need a few more. But as long as one of them shows up, there's going to be a debate. And I hope all three will. So we'll have a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and that goes right along with Thrive, right? You and I are going to be in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
Next Sunday, all day long, for the Thrive that's going on. And this is to help people on the other side of religion as they're deconstructing, to have support and to have to be able to kind of figure out their way on the other side of things. Because that early on process of deconstructing is often tumultuous and full of stress and anxiety, as you're trying to unravel what you used to believe in versus what you're now learning. And there are 15-minute talks all day long from really, I mean, John DeLynn and the Open Stories Foundation did a heck of a good job. Of course they did. We got you and me, right?
Absolutely.
So,
the proof's in the pudding.
And I think we're pretty early in the morning, aren't we?
By the way, from now on, I'd like for you to call me Mr. Charisma. Would you do that for me, Bill?
That's a good, like a wrestling one. You could be Mr. Charisma. I like that.
You know, Brandon #1 wasn't all bad.
No. I'm sure he wasn't. I just, couldn't let that sit. So,
oh, by the way, and also you are using next Sunday in the technically correct sense. I just want to make sure it's clear to everybody that that's a week from this coming Sunday on November 14th.
Yeah.
In Salt Lake City at the Salt Palace, right?
Yeah. And in fact, when are you coming into town, RFM?
I am flying in on Friday. I should be landing around noon on Friday the 12th.
Yeah. I'm going to come up Friday night. I'll probably be there a little late, so probably a little too late to do a dinner, although maybe not. If there are any listeners, I'm throwing this out kind of spur of the moment, but if there are any listeners who are going to be in the area, be at Thrive, if you want to grab a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner, I will try my best, and RFM, I'm sure you would too, try our best to sit down with a few of you and say hi and shake hands and get a chance to kind of touch base with you guys and hear your stories. I'll make myself available.
And I am normally first in line for a free meal, but I am going to be spending some time with my daughter who lives down there.
Okay. So it might be Bill Reel only, but if you're interested in grabbing a breakfast or a lunch and chatting for a little while, I would welcome that. Reach out to me. Just send me a message on maybe Facebook Messenger, or you can email the podcast at Mormon Discussions plural, podcast plural, at gmail.com. But yeah, we'll both be at Thrive. You're doing the debate. I'm hoping to be there for the debate as well. And
when he says that, he means in a supporting role, not on the stage.
No. I will,
because Midnight Mormons is going to grab that and they're going to run.
Yeah.
Taking things out of context is their fort.
Right. And they promised to apologize, right? And that hasn't happened yet, has it?
Have they promised to apologize? I'm not sure if they promised to apologize. I had the impression that they might actually put out some, I don't know, some correct information.
Let me say that differently. You corrected the story for them, and they now know that the way they posed it in their video is inaccurate, and they haven't chosen yet to correct it themselves, as far as you know.
Yeah, just ask John DeLynn. The last thing in the world you want is for them to give you an apology.
Yeah, no, it turns into something else, doesn't it?
Yes.
Cool. Well, great night, everybody. Thanks again, RFM. And I guess we can end off with this one little quote that always comes into play with the book, The Glass Looker.
Give Brother Joseph a break.
And otherwise, everybody have a fantastic night from Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel on Mormonism Live.
Good night, everybody.